In the heart of the endless night, where the moon's silver gaze mocked the forgotten, Myrith Noctine cast no shadow upon the frozen earth, a void that whispered of voids yet to come. The wind howled through the jagged peaks of the northern spires, carrying the scent of pine resin and distant blood, as if the mountains themselves wept for the condemned. Myrith stood at the precipice of the pit of oblivion, her bare feet sinking into the crust of snow that bordered the yawning chasm. At 27, she had known rejection's bite since birth, but this was its cruelest incarnation. Not a quiet exile, but a hurling into the abyss, branded a harbinger of emptiness. The pack's elders, their eyes gleaming with superstitious fire under the full moon, had declared her the corrupter of the goddess's light. Born without reflection in any mirror or pool, and without shadow to trail her steps, she was the omen no ritual could dispel. "The moon recoils from you," the high priestess had intoned, her voice a blade wrapped in silk, as chains rattled around Myrith's wrists. "You steal her essence, leaving only hunger in her wake." Now, those chains lay discarded at the edge, cold iron glinting like false stars against the white expanse. The pack gathered behind her, a sea of fur-mantled figures under torchlight that flickered erratically, casting long shadows that danced mockingly around her form. None touched her. Even in their fury, they feared the unnatural clarity she brought to darkness. Alaric Vorn's reign had hardened them all. The Alpha King's endless wars against rival clans had bred paranoia, turning inward like frostbite on the soul. But Myrith's anomaly was personal, a stain on their lunar faith. She had mended wounds with herbs and quiet words, tended the young ones through blizzards, yet whispers grew. Her touch drained the light from eyes. Her presence silenced the howls of the hunt. The final accusation came during the moonrite, when the full orb hung bloated and pale, and still no darkness clung to her skin. "She mocks the goddess," they cried, and the verdict fell like an avalanche. Myrith's breath fogged the air, her dark hair whipping across cheeks flushed from the biting cold. She felt the weight of their stares, not as heat, but as an absence, a hollowness mirroring her own. In her chest, a quiet storm raged. Not rage, but a profound weariness, the kind that questions if survival is mercy or curse. The pit below was legend, a scar in the earth where the goddess had once torn open the veil between worlds. No light pierced its depths. Creatures dwelled there, blind to the moon's grace, feasting on echoes and the lost. To be thrown in was to be erased, your name dissolved into the endless black. The executioner, a burly beta with scars like lightning across his arms, stepped forward. His torch sputtered, embers swirling into the void. "For the pack's purity," he growled, though his voice trembled. Myrith met his eyes, seeing the flicker of doubt, the same doubt that had shadowed her life. She could have pleaded, invoked the old laws of compassion, but words had failed her before. Instead, she straightened, her simple woolen shift clinging to her like a second skin, damp from the mist rising from the depths. The moon above bathed her in silver, illuminating every curve and hollow, yet leaving the snow at her feet untouched by her silhouette. It was her curse, this clarity. In a world of beasts who thrived on shadow's embrace, she was perpetual dawn, unwelcome and unrelenting. With a shove that sent snow cascading into the pit, they propelled her forward. She teetered, arms flailing against the wind's fierce grip, then tumbled. The fall was not swift. Time stretched like taffy in the cold, the air rushing past her ears in a roar that drowned the pack's chants. Rocks scraped her palms as she clawed at the sheer walls, slick with ice and moss. Far above, the torchlights receded to pinpricks, the moon a distant witness. Her heart pounded, not with terror, but with a strange resolve, the first true emotion in years that felt like her own. What is emptiness, she wondered, if not the space where light might finally bloom? She struck the bottom with a jolt that expelled the air from her lungs, rolling into a heap amid jagged stones and fetid pools. Pain bloomed in her ribs, sharp as shattered glass, but she pushed upright, gasping. The darkness here was absolute, a living thing that pressed against her eyelids, thick with the musk of earth and decay. No echoes answered her ragged breaths. The pit swallowed sound as it did souls. She waited for the beasts, the stories of eyeless horrors that tore flesh from bone. Minutes stretched into eternity, her skin prickling with the chill that seeped from the walls, carrying whispers of wind through unseen fissures. Then, a scrape. Soft, deliberate. From the gloom, shapes emerged, not as lunging predators, but hesitant forms, their hides matted and pale, eyes milky voids that turned toward her without sight. They were the Forsaken, twisted wolves, half-shifted souls warped by the pit's curse, noses twitching at her scent. Mireth froze, her pulse a drum in the silence. One approached, larger than the rest, its breath hot and ragged, sniffing the air where her shadow should have fallen. But as it neared, something shifted. The darkness around her lightened. Not a blaze, but a subtle glow emanating from her very skin, a soft luminescence that painted the creature's fur in ethereal silver. It tilted its head, a low whine escaping its throat, not of hunger, but awe. Others gathered, circling closer, their blind gazes fixed on the impossible light she cast. No shadow preceded her. Instead, clarity bloomed in her wake, illuminating veins of quartz in the stone, revealing the intricate scars on their hides. The lead beast nuzzled her hand, its tongue rough against her palm, and in that touch, Mireth felt a spark, not fear, but recognition. They called her nothing yet, but in their gathering, a name formed in the air, unspoken, Living Moon. As the glow steadied, casting long, unfamiliar patterns on the walls, patterns without her darkness to define them, Mireth knelt among them, the cold stone grounding her. The pack above had cast her as void, but here, in Oblivion's heart, she was revelation. Yet doubt lingered, a ethical thorn. Was this light a gift or a deception? Drawing devotion from the damned only to illuminate their suffering anew? The moon's distant pull tugged at her soul, promising trials beyond survival, and in that moment she wondered if redemption lay not in escape, but in embracing the emptiness she had always been. The glow from Mireth's skin lingered like a hesitant dawn, threading through the pit's oppressive black, revealing the twisted forms of the forsaken beasts in stark relief. Their milky eyes, blind to the moon's distant mercy, fixed on her with an intensity that bordered on reverence, their low whines weaving a tapestry of sound in the echoing void. She sat among them, her woolen shift torn and muddied, the chill seeping into her bones like an unwelcome lover. The lead creature, a hulking wolf thing with ribs protruding like the bars of a forgotten cage, pressed its flank against her thigh, its warmth a fragile anchor in the cold. No longer predators, they huddled close, as if her light were the first true sustenance they had known in ages. Yet Mireth's mind churned with unease. This devotion felt fragile, a bloom in barren soil, destined to wither under scrutiny. What did they see in her, these shadows of the damned, when she saw only the echo of her own isolation? Hours blurred in the pit's timeless grip, the air thick with the metallic tang of damp stone and the faint, earthy musk of the beast's hides. She traced patterns in the frost-kissed ground with her fingers, watching how her luminescence cast no shadow, only pure, unrelenting clarity that made the quartz veins in the walls pulse like hidden rivers of silver. It was her curse made manifest here, in Oblivion's cradle. Where light should falter, hers endured, unyielding and alone. The beasts stirred restlessly as a new rumble echoed from above, deeper than the wind's lament. A thunderous scrape of stone against stone, followed by a cascade of debris that rained down like brittle stars. Mirith tensed, her hand instinctively burying into the lead beast's fur, its growl vibrating through her palm. The creatures bristled, forming a loose circle around her, their blind vigilance a shield born of instinct. From the jagged maw of a fissure high in the wall, a figure descended, not tumbling like she had, but controlled, deliberate, ropes of woven vine and leather biting into gloved hands as he rappelled into the depths. Torchlight from the surface caught his silhouette briefly, etching him against the gloom. Broad-shouldered, cloaked in midnight furs that blended with the shadows, he cast long and jagged. He landed with a muffled thud, boots crunching on the scree, and straightened to his full height, a presence that filled the pit like the moon's own gravity. Alaric Vorn, king of the northern spires, was no stranger to descent. At 38, his body bore the map of endless wars, scars like frozen lightning across his exposed forearms, his jaw set in a line carved by unyielding duty. But tonight he came not as conqueror, but as fugitive, his breath ragged from the chase above. Rival alphas from the eastern clans had ambushed his patrol under the full moon's indifferent watch, their betrayal a poisoned arrow that still burned in his side. He had fought through the snow-swept passes, guilt gnawing deeper than the wound, another failure in a reign stained by blood, not his own. The pit had called to him in delirium, a place to end it all, away from the pack's expectant eyes. Death in oblivion seemed fitting for a king who had lost the goddess's favor. His howls silenced by the weight of choices that echoed like ghosts. He drew his dagger, its blade catching the faint glow from below, and scanned the darkness. The beast's growls rose in warning, a chorus that made the walls hum, but Alaric's senses sharpened, wolf's instinct overriding the pain lancing through his ribs. A scent cut through the decay, wild herbs and fresh snow, laced with something ethereal, like moonlight distilled into flesh. His eyes, storm-gray and haunted, narrowed as he stepped forward, the torch he had dropped sputtering out behind him. Fear prickled at the base of his skull, not of the creatures, but of the unnatural light blooming ahead, soft and insistent, painting the scene in hues of silver and frost. Mireth's heart stuttered as he emerged from the gloom, his form materializing like a specter from her shadowed dreams. The beasts surged toward him, hackles raised, but she whispered a command, soft, instinctive, and they halted, whining in confusion. Alaric froze, his gaze locking onto her. In that instant, the connection struck like a hidden current, raw, primal, pulling at the core of him. Her light bathed his face, revealing the deep lines of melancholy etched there, the faint stubble silvered by exhaustion. No shadow fell from her. Instead, his own stretched toward her, as if drawn to fill the void she left. Curiosity warred with dread in his chest. What Omega was this, radiant in the heart of nothing, commanding the Forsaken with a mere breath? "You," he rasped, voice gravel rough from disuse, stepping closer despite the beast's circling menace. Blood seeped through his tunic from the gash at his side, staining the snow red, a vivid slash against the white. Mireth rose slowly, her bare feet silent on the stone, the cold forgotten in the heat of his proximity. Fear coiled in her gut, not of his blade or his crown, but of the pull, the way his scent enveloped her like pine smoke and ancient oaths. She had been cast out for less, an anomaly that disrupted the natural order. To feel this now, in the pit's embrace, was to invite deeper ruin. "Who are you?" he demanded, though his eyes betrayed the lie. He knew on some lunar level that she was no mere survivor. "Mirith," she murmured, her voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs. The light from her skin intensified, illuminating the guilt in his furrowed brow, the ethical torment that mirrored her own isolation. He reached out, gloved hand hovering near her arm, as if testing the glow's reality. The touch never landed. Instinct recoiled, rationalizing the spark as trickery of the dark. yet curiosity burned brighter, a flame against the fear. The beasts watched, their whines softening to murmurs, as if even they sensed the fragile thread weaving between the fallen king and the shadowless Omega. In that suspended moment, with the moon's pull tugging at their souls through the unseen cracks above, Mireth wondered if this encounter was salvation or snare, a redemption forged in mutual wounds, or a deeper descent into the void they both carried. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The pit's chill deepened as the moon wheeled higher, its silver gaze filtering through fissures like veins of forgotten mercy, casting fractured light upon the huddled forms below. Mireth felt the weight of Alaric's presence as acutely as the stone beneath her, a gravitational pull that stirred the air between them, thick with the scent of his blood and the beast's wary musk. He stood unmoving, dagger still gripped in his fist, the blade's edge catching her glow in a shimmer that danced like captive stars. The forsaken creatures circled tighter, their blind eyes fixed on the intruder, low growls rumbling through the gloom like distant thunder. Yet Mireth's whisper held them at bay, her voice a thread of calm woven from the light she could not dim. In her chest, fear twisted with an unwelcome curiosity. This Alpha, with his storm-gray eyes etched by shadows she could never cast, seemed both hunter and hunted, a mirror to her own fractured existence. Alaric's breath came in shallow rasps, the wound at his side weeping crimson into the snow-dusted earth, each drop blooming vivid against the white like accusations unspoken. He had sought oblivion here, not alliance, but the pull toward her was visceral, a lunar tether that defied the pain lancing through his ribs. Mireth, he echoed, tasting the name as if it were ash and honey mingled. His gaze roamed her form, illuminated in her ethereal radiance, noting the absence that defined her. No shadow to soften the edges, only clarity that pierced the dark like a blade of frost. It unnerved him. This Omega who commanded the pits damned with quiet authority, her skin aglow as if the goddess had kissed her in defiance of the void. Guilt clawed at him anew. He was the king who had let such anomalies fester in his realm, too burdened by wars and betrayals to question the pack's cruelties. "What sorcery is this?" he murmured, sheathing his dagger with deliberate slowness, though his body coiled for flight or fight. She stepped closer, the beasts parting like mist before her, their whines softening to murmurs of acceptance. The cold bit at her bare soles, but the heat radiating from him, fierce, alive, drew her despite the rational voice in her mind screaming caution. Touch him, and the fragile sanctuary of the pit might shatter, deny the instinct, and the isolation she had always known would swallow her whole. "No sorcery," she replied, her voice steady, laced with the weariness of one who had explained her curse 1,000 times. "Just me. The light they fear above finds purchase here." Her hand hovered near his arm, fingers trembling not from the frost, but from the spark that arced between them, unspoken and electric. The lead beast nudged her leg, its warmth a reminder of the devotion she had unwittingly claimed. But now, with Alaric's arrival, the air hummed with tension, as if the pit itself held its breath. A sudden tremor shook the walls, pebbles cascading from the heights like brittle warnings. Alaric's head snapped up, his wolf's senses flaring amid the haze of blood loss. Above, shouts echoed, harsh, commanding voices laced with the Eastern clan's guttural accents. The rivals had tracked him, their betrayal extending into this forsaken depth, torches flaring like angry eyes against the night. "They come for me," he growled, pressing a hand to his side, the fabric sodden and warm. Pain sharpened his focus, but beneath it lurked the melancholy of a king who had led his people to too many edges. He had no right to drag this Omega into his ruin, yet the bond forming, instinctive, resisted, made retreat impossible. "Stay back. This is my war." Mireth's light flared brighter, illuminating the fissures where shadows should have pooled, revealing the intricate web of roots and stone that bound the pit's secrets. Fear coiled in her gut, not for the intruders, but for the vulnerability this alpha exposed, his ethical torment laid bare in the furrow of his brow. She had survived rejection by turning inward, but here empathy stirred like a hidden flame, warming the hollows of her isolation. "No," she said softly, her hand finally brushing his arm, gloved leather yielding to the glow that seeped through. The contact sent a jolt through them both, his breath hitching as her radiance eased the ache in his wound, not healing but soothing, like moonlight on frost-bitten skin. The beasts bristled, forming a perimeter, their forms twisting in the half-light she provided, no longer blind but guided by her clarity. The first assailant descended, a lithe beta with eyes gleaming like polished obsidian, rope uncoiling as he dropped into the fray. His blade flashed, aimed for Alaric's throat, but the king moved with feral grace, parrying with a snarl that echoed off the walls. Blood sprayed, warm and metallic, spattering the snow near Mireth's feet. Red against white, a stark reminder of the world's unyielding bite. She recoiled, heart pounding, but the beasts lunged at her unspoken command, their twisted bodies a whirlwind of claws and teeth. One tore at the intruder's leg, eliciting a scream that reverberated like a profane prayer, while Alaric dispatched another who followed, his movements precise yet burdened, each strike laced with the weight of guilt for the lives he could not save. In the chaos, Mireth pressed against the wall, her light casting the battle in silvered relief, no shadows to hide treachery, only raw truth. Alaric fought back to her side, his chest heaving, a fresh gash across his shoulder mingling with the old. Their eyes met amid the snarls and clashes, the connection deepening from curiosity to something perilously like trust. He grabbed her wrist, pulling her behind a jutting boulder as more foes rappelled down, their torches sputtering in the damp air. "Why help me?" he rasped, his grip firm yet gentle, the scent of pine and blood enveloping her like a cloak. Empathy bloomed in her then, fierce and unbidden, seeing in him the same rejection she bore, not from pack, but from fate itself. "Because the void takes enough," she whispered, her free hand pressing to his wound, the glow intensifying, staunching the flow with an warmth that defied the cold. The beasts held the line, their whines turning to triumphant howls as the last intruder fell, body crumpling into the scree with a final gurgling breath. Silence descended, broken only by the distant wind's lament and the rapid cadence of their breaths. Alaric released her, but the bond lingered, a tether forged in shared peril. He sank against the stone, exhaustion etching deeper lines into his face, while Mireth knelt beside him, the forsaken creatures curling at their feet like guardians reborn. In that refuge, amid the blood-streaked snow and the moon's watchful eye, she felt the first stirrings of transformation. Not just survival, but a quiet strength. The choice to extend her light to one as broken as she. Yet doubt whispered, was this union a balm or a chain, binding them to trials yet unseen? The pit, once her exile, now cradled them both, its darkness yielding to the fragile dawn of their proximity. The moon's fractured light seeped through the pit's fissures like whispered secrets, bathing the bloodied stone in a pallor that made the fallen warriors' forms seem spectral, their crimson stains fading to ghosts on the snow-dusted ground. Mireth knelt beside Alaric, her glow a steady pulse against the encroaching dark, illuminating the furrows of exhaustion on his face. The beasts lay curled at the edges of their makeshift sanctuary, their breaths sinking with the wind's low moan, as if the pit itself exhaled in relief. Her hand still rested on his shoulder, where the fresh gash wept, and though she willed it away, the warmth from her touch lingered, a subtle thrum that eased the edges of his pain without fully banishing it. In the quiet aftermath, doubt coiled in her chest like frost on a window pane. What had she unleashed by binding her light to his wounds? The absence of her shadow stretched empty beside them, a void that now seemed less curse and more canvas, waiting for the strokes of fate. Alaric shifted, his storm-gray eyes lifting to meet hers, the melancholy in them deepening as the adrenaline ebbed. He had fought beside her light, felt its clarity cut through the chaos like a blade of truth, revealing every feint and flaw in the assailant's strikes. No illusions thrived under her radiance. Betrayal stood naked, and in that exposure he had prevailed. Yet victory tasted of ash, for it only amplified the guilt that had driven him here. The Eastern clan's treachery was his failure, a ripple from wars he had waged in the name of a pack that now hunted him as much as his rivals did. "You, mend without hands," he murmured, voice rough as gravel under boot, his gloved fingers brushing the edge of the wound where her touch had cooled the fire. The contact sent a shiver through him, not of cold, but recognition, the primal bond tugging insistently, resisted by the rational walls he had built around his fractured throne. Mireth withdrew her hand, the glow dimming slightly, as if shy of scrutiny. The air between them hummed with the scent of iron and pine, mingled with the faint, herbal trace of her skin. Wild thyme crushed underfoot in her fall. She had always known her light as anomaly, a flicker that unnerved the pack above, but here, in this alpha's gaze, it felt like revelation, stirring something dormant within. "It's no mending," she said softly, her breath fogging in the chill that clawed at the boulder shielding them. "Just presence. The dark yields to it, but I've never understood why." The beasts stirred, one nuzzling closer, its milky eyes reflecting her luminescence like fractured moons. She felt their devotion as a weight, a chorus of silent pleas. "Illuminate us, living moon." But with Alaric, it was different. His nearness amplified the glow, as if her void drew strength from his shadowed soul, filling what she lacked with the depth of his own burdens. A low rumble echoed from the heights, not thunder, but the grind of shifting stone, as if the pit mourned the spilled blood. Alaric tensed, his body coiling despite the weariness, but no new foes descended. Instead, a sliver of moonlight pierced deeper, striking the pool of water nearby, a stagnant mirror at the cavern's heart, rippling with the drip of melting ice. Mireth's eyes were drawn to it, the surface unbroken, save for the faint disturbance. She rose, drawn by an instinct older than fear, her bare feet tracing a path through the scree, the cold biting sharp but distant. Alaric followed, his steps heavy, the bond pulling him like an unseen chain. As she approached the pool, her reflection should have been absent, as always. No face to greet her in glass or water, only the world's empty stare back. But tonight, under the intensified lunar gaze, something shifted. The water stilled, and there, faint at first, like mist coalescing, she saw it, not her form, but a silhouette, ethereal and silvered, blooming from the depths. It was her shadow, not cast upon the ground, but born within the reflection, a presence where none had ever been. Gasping, Mireth knelt, fingers trailing the icy edge, and the image sharpened, her outline, graceful and unbroken, trailing tendrils of light that wove through the water like veins of quartz. The beasts gathered, whining in awe, their blind forms silhouetted against her glow, while Alaric's breath caught, his hand finding her shoulder. "The goddess," he whispered, the words laced with reverence and dread. In that moment, the full truth unfurled. Her absence was no curse, but a vessel, a hidden gift to bridge the veil between light and void. Under the moon's full embrace, where shadows should claim all, hers emerged not as darkness, but as living clarity, a pathfinder's mark, destined to reveal paths unseen, to heal the fractured fates of the forsaken. Alaric's mind reeled, the weight of prophecy crashing over him like an avalanche. He had descended seeking death, fleeing a crown tarnished by guilt. The packs divided, the goddess's silence a judgment on his unyielding wars. But now, staring into the pool where her shadow danced free, he saw the key to his destiny. This Omega, shadowless no more, was the Redeemer he had unknowingly sought. Her light had not just illuminated the pit, it unraveled the curses binding his soul, the ethical thorns of power versus compassion that had haunted his reign. "You are the living moon," he said, voice steadying with newfound resolve, turning her to face him. His eyes, once stormy with isolation, softened. The bond no longer resisted, but embraced, a tether of mutual revelation. Yet in her gaze, he glimpsed the dilemma. To claim her as ally meant dragging her into his shadowed throne, forcing choices between her hard-won sanctuary and the wars above. Mareth felt the manifestation ripple through her, a warmth blooming in her core, chasing the chill from her limbs. The shadow in the pool faded as the moonlight waned, but its echo lingered in her veins, a dawn that promised not just survival, but transformation. Tears pricked her eyes, not of sorrow, but awakening. The pack's rejection had blinded them to this truth, casting her into oblivion only to forge her anew. With Alaric's hand on hers, the air thickened with possibility, the beast's howls rising in distant harmony, as if the winds themselves bore witness. But doubt whispered still. Was this gift a crown or a chain, illuminating destinies that might demand her light's sacrifice? The pit, once tomb, now pulsed with lunar life, urging them toward the trials ahead. Revelation not as end, but as the forge of redemption. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw you're the moon, hung bloated and merciless above the pit's jagged rim, its silver tendrils probing the fissures like fingers seeking buried sins, illuminating the blood-flecked stone where revelation had taken root. Mareth stood at the pool's edge, the ethereal shadow from its depths now a faint echo in her veins, pulsing with a warmth that warred against the encroaching frost. Alaric's hand lingered on her shoulder, his touch a anchor amid the beast's soft whines, their twisted forms encircling them like silent sentinels reborn under her light. The air thrummed with the scent of damp earth and lingering iron, the wind's howl filtering down as a mournful dirge, carrying fragments of the world above, shouts, the clash of steel, the distant thunder of paws on snow. Her gift had awakened, not as a blaze but a steady flame, revealing paths in the void. The quartz veins that mapped hidden tunnels, the subtle shifts in the stone that whispered of escape. Yet with awakening came the weight of judgment, the past clawing upward like roots through frozen soil. Alaric's breath ghosted against her ear, ragged from the wounds her glow had merely soothed. "We cannot linger," he murmured, his voice laced with the gravel of command long eroded by guilt. His storm-gray eyes scanned the heights, where torchlight flickered like predatory eyes, the eastern rivals regrouping, their betrayal a festering wound on his reign. He had glimpsed her truth, the Pathfinder's mark, her shadowless essence now a bridge to the goddess's veiled will, and in that vision, hope stirred, fragile as new ice. But hope demanded action, and action meant confronting the throne he had fled, the pack that had cast her down. The bond between them tugged insistently, no longer a spark of instinct, but a cord woven from shared isolation, resisted only by the rational fear of what it might demand. To claim her light was to invite her into his shadows. To leave her here was to betray the redemption she offered. Mareth pulled away gently, her bare feet crunching on the scree, the cold a sharp reminder of vulnerability. The beasts stirred, their milky gazes following her, devotion etched in every hesitant step. She felt the gift's expansion, a clarity that extended beyond her skin, illuminating not just stone, but souls, peeling back the layers of Alaric's melancholy to reveal the ethical fractures beneath. A king who had chosen war over mercy, power over the pack's quiet healers like her. "The path's open," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her core, tracing a hand along a glowing vein in the wall. It pulsed under her touch, the stone yielding like flesh, revealing a narrow crevice that sloped upward, laced with frost and the faint echo of wind-swept pines. Freedom beckoned, a moral crossroads. Flee into the wilds, her light a solitary beacon, or ascend with him, weaving their fates into the pack's tangled web of betrayal and blood. The decision crystallized as a roar erupted from above, not the wind, but the pack's own. Alaric's loyalists, drawn by the fray, clashing with the eastern invaders in a symphony of snarls and steel. Torch flames danced erratically, casting crimson reflections into the pit, turning the snow-sprinkled ledges into a canvas of fire and ice. Among the voices, one cut through like poisoned honey. Thorn, the high priestess's favored beta, the traitor whose whispers had fueled Mireth's exile. She had seen his ambition in the moonlight, the way his eyes lingered on Alaric's crown, allying with Eastern alphas to topple the king under guise of lunar purity. Now, his howl taunted. "The void claims its own, king and curse alike." Alaric's face hardened, the melancholy yielding to a feral resolve, his body tensing as if the bond with Mireth fueled his strength. "He comes for us both," he growled, drawing his dagger once more, the blade's edge catching her glow in a silver arc. Blood from his wounds had crusted, but pain sharpened his senses, the guilt transforming into a quiet fury, not vengeful, but redemptive, a chance to atone by protecting the light he had unknowingly condemned. Mireth's heart pounded, the air thick with the metallic tang of impending violence, her light flaring brighter, illuminating the crevice's path as a vein of destiny. The beasts bristled, forming a wedge behind her, their whines rising to howls that echoed Thorn's challenge, as if the Forsaken claimed her as their own. They moved as one, Alaric's gloved hand clasping hers, warm, calloused, a tether against the chill, guiding her into the ascending tunnel. The stone walls closed in, slick with meltwater that dripped like tears. The wind's moan growing to a gale that whipped her hair across cheeks, flushed with exertion. Her glow lit the way, revealing handholds in the ice, pitfalls veiled in shadow that her clarity banished. Above, the confrontation swelled. The pack's loyal betas surged against the eastern horde, fur matted with snow and blood, under the moon's unblinking watch. Thorn's form emerged at the pit's rim, his silhouette jagged against the flames, eyes gleaming with fanatic zeal as he scented her ascent. "The corruptor rises!" he bellowed, leaping down with rivals in tow, their boots dislodging avalanches of scree that thundered past the tunnel's mouth. Mireth emerged first, scrambling onto the snow-swept ledge, the full moon bathing her in unrelenting silver. No shadow to soften her outline. Only the ethereal clarity that now summoned her, manifested silhouette from the ether, faint but insistent, trailing like a luminous veil. The beasts poured out behind her, a tide of twisted fury, while Alaric vaulted up, positioning himself between her and the fray. Thorn landed with a snarl, his blade drawn, the Eastern Alpha at his side, a hulking rival named Draven, whose scars spoke of old grudges against Alaric's wars. "You bring the void to our hearth, my king?" Thorn sneered, circling, his gaze locking on Mireth with superstitious dread. Her light exposed him, stripping the piety from his features to reveal the raw ambition beneath, the moral rot of betrayal. The battle erupted visceral and swift. Draven lunged at Alaric, claws extended in a bid for the throne, their bodies colliding in a blur of fur and steel, blood spraying hot against the snow, red blooms under the moon's gaze, steaming in the frost. Thorn turned on Mireth, his strike aimed to end the anomaly, but the beasts intercepted, their howls a cacophony that shook the spires. She dodged, heart slamming, her light flaring to reveal his feints. The path of his blade, a transparent arc. Alaric dispatched Draven with a thrust born of desperate precision, the rival crumpling with a gurgle, but turned to see Thorn bearing down on her. "No!" he roared, tackling the traitor, their forms rolling in a tangle of limbs and oaths, the snow churning to crimson slush. Mirith intervened, her hand pressing to Thorn's brow as he pinned Alaric, the glow surging, not to harm, but to illuminate, forcing visions into his mind. The pack's suffering under his schemes, the goddess's mercy twisted into chains. He recoiled, eyes widening in horror, the ethical weight crashing down. Forgiveness or war? She could end him with a word to the beasts, claim vengeance for her exile, or offer the light of truth, freeing him to atone. Love or freedom tugged at her soul, the bond with Alaric a promise of union, yet demanding she choose compassion over the pack's retributive justice. As Thorn staggered back, gasping, the loyalists crested the rim, their howls a mix of triumph and confusion, the moon witnessing her dilemma. To forgive the betrayer was to risk her light's betrayal. To wage war was to dim the redemption she had found in the pit's depths. In that frozen instant, with blood pooling warm at her feet and Alaric's gaze pleading from the snow, Mirith felt the weight of choice settle like the first snowflake, soft, inevitable, a moral forge where power yielded to mercy or shattered under its refusal. The wind howled louder, carrying the scent of pine and possibility as the pack closed in, their fates entwined under the unrelenting lunar eye. The snow-laden wind whipped across the ledge like a vengeful spirit, carrying the metallic bite of blood and the raw howls of the pack, their forms blurring into a frenzy under the moon's unyielding scrutiny. Mirith's light pulsed erratically, casting the scene in fractured silver. No shadows to cloak the chaos, only stark revelations that peeled back fur and flesh to expose the trembling hearts beneath. Thorn staggered back from her touch, his eyes wild with the visions she had forced upon him. The pack's hollowed faces during famines he had prolonged for power, the young ones orphaned by his whispered alliances, the goddess's light twisted into a noose around their faith. He clutched his head, kneeling in the crimson slush, a broken silhouette against the white expanse, his blade forgotten in the snow. The loyalists halted at the rim, their breaths heaving in clouds of frost, confusion rippling through their ranks like cracks in ice. Alaric rose slowly, his body a map of fresh wounds. The bond with Mirith thrumming through him like a second pulse, urging him toward her side. She stood frozen, the cold seeping through her torn shift, numbing her skin but not the fire in her core. The beasts flanked her, their twisted hides steaming in the night air, low growls vibrating the stone as they eyed the encroaching pack. Her manifested shadow, faint, luminous, trailed her like a whispered promise, born from the pit's depths and the moon's full gaze, a bridge between void and revelation. Yet in this moment, it felt like a chain, binding her to choices that echoed the pack's ancient dilemmas. Power's iron grip or compassion's fragile bloom. Forgive Thorn and risk the traitor's blade turning inward once more, condemn him, and mirror the rejection that had hurled her into oblivion. Alaric's gaze met hers across the bloodied ground, storm-gray eyes pleading not for victory, but for the mercy he had long denied his own soul. What is strength, she pondered amid the wind's lament, if not the courage to heal what claws at the throat? The eastern remnants surged forward, Draven's fallen form a grim omen, their howls a cacophony of vengeance. A beta lunged at a loyalist, claws raking fur in a spray of red that steamed against the frost, the metallic tang sharp in Mireth's nostrils. She moved instinctively, her light flaring to illuminate the fray, not as weapon, but guide, revealing the subtle feints, the hidden daggers glinting in torchlight. The beasts charged into the melee, their blind fury transformed by her clarity, tearing through the invaders with a precision born of devotion. Alaric fought at her flank, his dagger a silver arc under the moon, dispatching a rival with a thrust that ended in a gurgle, his breath ragged, guilt etching deeper lines into his brow. Each strike was a confession. The weight of his reign's bloodshed now shared in the bond that pulled him to her light, rationalizing the connection as duty, even as instinct screamed of deeper union. Thorn rose unsteadily, his face a mask of fractured piety, the visions lingering like frostbite on his spirit. He turned not on Mireth, but on his eastern allies, blade flashing in betrayal's echo, a moral fracture she had ignited. The void. It shows truth, he rasped, voice cracking as he felled one of his own, blood blooming dark on the snow. The pack watched, a sea of eyes reflecting her glow, whispers rising like steam. The living moon returned not as curse, but clarion. Yet doubt gnawed at her. Had her gift forced redemption, or merely exposed the rot, demanding she bear the cost? A rival alpha broke through, massive and scarred, his claws aimed for Alaric's back. Mireth cried out, her hand extending, the light surging in a wave that bathed him in silver, revealing the old wound in his side, a mark from Alaric's wars, festering with unspoken grudge. The alpha faltered, howling in anguish, and Alaric spun, ending the threat with a mercy kill, his eyes locking on hers in silent gratitude. The battle waned as the moon crested higher, its light a cold fire that turned the snow to a canvas of silver and scarlet. Bodies littered the ledge, the air thick with the coppery reek of death and the pine-scented wind sweeping down from the spires. The loyalists encircled them, not as executioners but witnesses, their howls shifting to a reverent chorus under her radiance. Thorn knelt again, offering his blade hilt first to Alaric, tears carving paths through the grime on his cheeks. Forgive, or end it, my king. The goddess speaks through her. Alaric hesitated, the dagger heavy in his grip, his melancholy a storm contained. He had built his throne on swift justice, wars that claimed too many for the illusion of peace. But Mireth's presence, her shadowless clarity now a luminous veil, whispered of another path. He dropped the weapon into the snow, the steel clanging like a broken oath. Rise, Thorn. Atonement is no gift. It's the forge. The beta nodded, rising to join the ranks, the pack's murmurs swelling to acceptance. The ethical wound cauterized not by blood, but choice. Mireth felt the shift like a thaw in her bones, the wind's howl softening to a sigh, carrying the distant ewe-ive of wolves unbound. Her light steadied, illuminating the faces around her, not with fear, but hope. The void she embodied now a vessel for renewal. Alaric stepped to her side, his hand finding hers, calloused fingers intertwining with her slender ones, the warmth chasing the chill from her veins. The bond sealed in that touch, no longer resisted, but embraced. A union forged in the pit's fire, where love was not conquest, but mutual rebirth. Yet as the pack closed in, their eyes gleaming with lunar faith renewed, a deeper sacrifice loomed. To ascend with him meant surrendering her sanctuary's solitude, weaving her light into the throne's tangled shadows, healing a realm that had once cast her down. Tears blurred her vision, the moon's gaze a benediction and burden, as she wondered if true Renascimento demanded not just union, but the surrender of self to the greater flame. In the hush that followed, with blood cooling on the snow and the beasts curling at her feet like reclaimed kin, Mireth leaned into Alaric's strength, the wind whispering promises of trials yet to come. The spires loomed eternal, their peaks piercing the night sky, and in that vast silence she chose, not freedom alone, but the redemptive blaze of shared destiny, even as it threatened to consume the light she had only just claimed. The moon's zenith bathed the northern spires in a silver pallor that turned the bloodied ledge into a tapestry of frost and fire, its light weaving through the howls of the wind like threads of an unfinished fate. Mireth's breath came in shallow waves, the chill seeping into her lungs as the pack encircled them, their forms a blurred sea of fur and torch glow, eyes reflecting her luminous veil, not with the old terror, but a dawning reverence that felt both balm and blade. Alaric's hand in hers was a steady anchor, calloused warmth against her chilled skin, the bond between them a living pulse that thrummed with the moon's rhythm, urging her toward the precipice of choice. The beasts lay at her feet, their twisted bodies heaving in exhausted harmony, while Thorn stood among the loyalists, his face etched with the raw scars of atonement, the traitor reborn, not in vengeance, but in the quiet forge of mercy. Yet in her core, the void stirred, a reminder of the shadowless essence that had defined her, now transformed into this ethereal silhouette, trailing her steps like a ghost of possibility. What is rebirth, she wondered, if not the surrender of isolation to the fire of shared scars? The wind carried the scent of pine resin and cooling blood, sharp against the metallic tang that lingered in the air, as the pack's murmurs swelled into a choral hush. Alaric turned to her, his storm-gray eyes holding the weight of his crown's redemption. The melancholy that had driven him to the pit now softened by the clarity she brought. He had chosen mercy over the swift justice of his blade, echoing her own ethical leap, but the cost loomed in the shadows of the spires. The eastern clans would not yield, their grudges a festering wound that demanded more than one night's truce. "The throne calls," he said, voice low and resonant, like the rumble of distant thunder over snow. His free hand brushed her cheek, thumb tracing the line of her jaw, igniting a spark that chased the frost from her veins. The touch was intimate, resisted no longer by the rational barriers of duty or fear, but embraced as the union it promised, a healing forged in mutual wounds, where his guilt met her exile in the crucible of lunar grace. Myrith felt the pull of it, deep as the pit's abyss, her light flaring gently to illuminate the faces around them. The young betas with eyes wide in wonder, the elders whose superstitious fires had dimmed under her glow. Thorn's bowed head, a testament to the paths her gift revealed. The manifested shadow at her feet danced faintly, silvered and unbound, a symbol of the void, filled not by darkness, but by the light of connection. She could flee into the wilds, her radiance a solitary beacon guiding the forsaken beasts to forgotten glens, preserving the fragile sanctuary she had claimed below. Freedom whispered in the wind's sigh, tempting with the peace of solitude, where no pack's judgment could dim her essence. Or she could ascend fully, weaving her light into Alaric's shadowed reign, healing the fractures of war and betrayal, sacrificing the quiet bloom of her rebirth for the greater flame of a realm renewed. Love, in this epic weave of fate, was no gentle reward but a trial of the soul, demanding she offer her clarity to the very world that had cast her down. A tremor shook the ledge, not from the fray, but from deeper earth, the goddess's subtle affirmation, the quartz veins in the stone pulsing like hidden arteries under her gaze. The pack shifted, their howls rising in a tentative harmony, the air thick with the musk of fur and the faint, herbal trace of her skin, now mingled with Alaric's pine smoke aura. He drew her closer, his breath warm against her temple, the bond sealing in the shared rhythm of their hearts, beating against the night's vast silence. "Choose with me, living moon," he murmured, the words laced with the vulnerability of a king unmasked, his ethical torment laid bare. To rule with compassion meant risking the throne's iron laws, inviting her light to challenge the old ways. Even if it demanded his own sacrifice, the crown yielded to Mercy's crown. In his eyes, she saw the reflection of her own dilemma, the romantic tragedy of their union, tenderness born from the pit's thorns, where redemption was not escape, but entanglement. The decision settled in her like the first melt of spring ice, soft yet inexorable, as she stepped forward, releasing Alaric's hand only to raise her arms to the moon. Her light surged, a radiant wave that bathed the spires in silver, banishing the lingering shadows of doubt. No absence now, but a fullness that illuminated the paths ahead. alliances forged in forgiveness, wars ended by revelation, a pack reborn under the goddess's unveiled gaze. The beasts rose, their whines transforming to triumphant weavos that echoed through the peaks, while the loyalists knelt, thorn among them, their oaths a chorus of renewal. She turned to Alaric, her fingers intertwining with his once more, the union complete, not as conquest, but as mutual rebirth, where her void filled his melancholy and his strength grounded her ethereal flame. Sacrifice and healing intertwined. The choice a spiritual vow. To heal the realm was to heal themselves, transcending hierarchies in the lunar dance of destiny and freedom. As the wind softened to a caress, carrying the distant call of wolves unbound, Mirith leaned into him, the moon's light crowning them both in silvered grace. The spires stood sentinel, eternal witnesses to the Renascimento, where rejection yielded to revelation, and the living moon claimed her place not in exile, but at the heart of the flame. In that profound silence, broken only by the steady beat of united souls, she knew the truth. Love was the ultimate proof, a redemptive blaze that lit the night eternal. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.